Published 0937 EDT, the 5th of October 2017. Updated 0937 EDT, the 5th of October 2017. For a long time the Japanese Grand Prix was the scene for a title decider as one of the final races of the season, and not just at what is considered the traditional home of the race, Suzuka. Honda's test track didn't even hold the first Formula One World Championship race in the country. That honor went to Fuji in 1976, who on its debut crowned Britain's last world champion for 16 years when James Hunt battled the elements to win the title by a point. Whenever F1 visited Toyota's home base, it always proved a thriller, which makes it somewhat surprising that only 4 Grand Prix have only ever been staged to the backdrop of Mount Fuji. Located in Oyama, Shizuoka, Fuji Speedway was originally designed in the 1960s as an oval-like circuit with extreme banking. This was however never finished, although a section of the oval banking lies abandoned off the venue boundaries at Turn 1. Lewis Hamilton gives you a tour around the modern circuit with this onboard lap for McLaren in 2008. A Sportsmail looks back at the brief but action-packed F1 history at Fuji. The Fuji Speedway racetrack has held 4 Grand Prix and is notable for having Mount Fuji among its scenic backdrop. Despite its fairly simple design, Fuji was the subject of a variety of changes between its 20-year gap of hosting Grand Prix racing. Most notably, the section between Turn 8 and Turn 16 was one long corner named 300R that would then tighten to release the cars onto the straight. The old circuit featured just 6 corners and none of them were chicanes. Race day for the first Japanese Grand Prix was hit by fog and torrential rain, which led to rivers running across the circuit. Even in the less safety-sensitive days of the 1970s, many drivers were concerned with the conditions. The teams wait for the start of the race under the driving rain, with James Hunt's McLaren looking most ready to tackle the testing conditions. Despite concerns over safety, the drivers looked relaxed before the final race of the season, where the World Championship would be decided. Contenders James Hunt left and Niki Lauda center share a joke along with Ronnie Peterson after the go-ahead for the race was given. World Championship leader Niki Lauda sensationally pulled into the pits on the second lap to retire from the Grand Prix. The Ferrari driver felt the conditions were not safe enough to drive in during a year where the Austrian had already been involved in a horrifying crash at the Nürburgring that nearly cost him his life. As spectators look on under umbrellas, Hunt kicks up spray down the home straight. In a race he led the first 61 laps. The Brit only needed 4th place to win the title following Lauda's withdrawal, but as the track dried in the final few laps, tire problems leading to a pit stop resulted in the McLaren star dropping down to 5th place. Hunt though battled back to 3rd, passing Clay Regazzoni and Alan Jones on the penultimate lap to claim the World Championship, having thought he had blown it before claiming he wished he and Lauda could have shared it. The Brit celebrates with his brother Peter following the race. Son finally did arrive at Fuji a year later, but by this point Hunt's hopes of defending his world championship had long since evaporated as Lauda stormed to the title with ease. The Brit though ended the season on a high, with victory, having led all 73 laps at the Japanese Grand Prix in what would prove to be his last triumph in Formula One. The 1977 race was more notable for a horror crash involving Gilles Villeneuve and Ronnie Peterson's Tyrrell on the 5th lap, with the former colliding into the back of Sweden, an incident that sent his Ferrari car airborne. Villeneuve's out of control Ferrari appears to head towards spectators before eventually landing in a restricted area of the circuit. Sadly, the crash resulted in the deaths of a photographer and a track marshal who were struck by debris. It's a Lotus, but not as you know it. The worldwide familiar black and gold JPS livery designed wasn't on show for the Japanese Grand Prix and instead replaced by parent company Imperial Tobacco, who ran a striking red design. Gunnar Nielsen drives the car on the way to a 7th consecutive retirement in his last Grand Prix before his death from cancer a year later. The podium ceremony following the 1977 finale proved a farce, with race winner Hunt and second-placed Carlos Reutemann skipping the post-race tradition to catch a flight home. It left Patrick Depailler celebrating on his own after grabbing 3rd for Tyrrell. To avoid future debacle, F1 rules were quickly amended to make attending the podium ceremony mandatory. After a 20-year absence, the Japanese GP returned to Fuji. The circuit had been tweaked to slow the cars down in the final sector, but nostalgia was in the air in the form of a torrential downpour on race day. Unlike in 1976, the race was started behind the safety car. Conditions failed to improve much once the action got underway as Lewis Hamilton leads Fernando Alonso, but trying to keep up with his McLaren teammate, Alonso crashed out the race on the 42nd lap to bring out the safety car. It would be the double world champion's only retirement all season and would ultimately cost him the championship. Thought the Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber feud started while they were teammates at Red Bull. Webber, who had already vomited in his crash helmet, was running second behind Hamilton when under the safety car he was driven into by the German's Toro Rosso. It was later revealed that Hamilton's dangerous driving under the safety car caused the incident. Post-race, Webber furiously claimed, "Well, it's kids with not enough experience, doing a good job, then they F it all up." Despite his rookie errors under the safety car, Hamilton's first year in Formula One still saw him head and shoulders above the rest of the field under atrocious wet conditions, and he would go on to take a commanding victory in his quest for the title. Hamilton celebrates victory on the podium in front of Renault's second-placed Heikki Kovalainen left and Ferrari's Kimi Räikkönen. Despite opening a 17-point gap over the latter with just 20 points on the table, it was to be the Finn who would pip Hamilton and McLaren teammate Alonso to the World Championship by just 1 point over the final 2 races a year on. And while there was no rain at Fuji, there was still plenty of drama, and not just because the tires had green stripes to promote environmentally friendly driving. Having been passed from the start by Kimi Räikkönen, Lewis Hamilton locks his brakes into turn 1 in a move that would lead to the duo and Heikki Kovalainen left being forced off the circuit. The Brit would eventually be penalized for the incident with a drive-through that helped ruin his chances of race victory. Wasn't just the front 3 involved in lap 1 carnage, as Renault's Fernando Alonso escapes in the foreground running second. David Coulthard was forced off circuit and into a barrier, while Kazuki Nakajima damaged his front wing of his Williams trying to avoid the Red Bull driver before pitting for a new nose cone at the end of the lap. The 2 main title contenders came to blows during the race. Hamilton was again involved after passing Felipe Massa, but this time it was the Ferrari driver penalized with a drive-through penalty after sending the Brit into a spin trying to repass at turn 10. Alonso would eventually pass BMW's Robert Kubica to take victory, his second straight success following a win in Singapore. The Spaniard is soaked in champagne by the Polish driver as third-placed Kimi Räikkönen looks on for Ferrari. Alonso celebrates his unexpected back-to-back victories with his team in the Fuji paddock. Despite 2 incident-packed Grand Prix at the circuit following its return, the track was criticized for its negative fan experience, and from 2009 the Japanese Grand Prix reverted back to its previous home at Suzuka, where it remains to this day.